Cloud. Here we go. Hey, John Picozzi. It's so awesome to connect with you. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to connect in person, but I'm very happy to have this opportunity because we don't normally see each other at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday.
That is true. Usually it's around 7 o'clock on a Thursday. But yeah, it's great. It's great to be talking to you during the daylight.
I know. Yeah. 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 And thanks so much for taking the time to bring along some insights and career tips for recent college grads and other people who may be looking for a job in digital marketing. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and your digital marketing journey?
Yeah, so it's unorthodox to say the least. But I work for a company called Oomph Inc. We are located in Providence, Rhode Island, but we have employees all across the country. We have a remote team of our total team's about 35 people. And we're digital consultants, basically digital consultancy, and working with all sorts of clients to solve really tricky digital problems. And most of the time we're doing that through the web, but there are various other avenues that we go down. My background specifically, I have a background in web development. Started off at Johnson& Wales in Providence, Rhode Island, getting a degree in web development and internet commerce. And from there, started working at a startup actually, and just doing like building, web pages basically. And then from there, jumped into ad agencies and worked through a couple of agencies, moved into digital agencies, and now I'm actually an account manager at Oomph. Recently switched from more of the production role to doing account management, and helping to find the right solutions for clients, and really making connections with people to see how Oomph can help them grow their business.
Nice. So is there a specific type of client that Oomph tends to work with?
Uh, no, we focus on a couple of core verticals. We do a lot in healthcare, education, the arts, nonprofits. But really, we like to work with anybody. We have this idea of having lifetime clients and lifetime partnerships, and that's really what we're bringing to the table. We're not looking for a one and done engagement. We're looking for to build a relationship, really understand the goals of our clients, and be able to use that information to provide the appropriate technical solutions to solve their problems.
And you are a previous NIM speaker. Also, we're going to have you in October, which I'm really excited about. But what's making me think about NIM is you gave a talk that to me, I think the biggest takeaway for a lot of people was to start thinking about, okay, I need a new website, but thinking down the line in terms of what other things, how your website can grow with you. It's sort of like when you buy um, a crib, right? And you want the crib, but you also want the furniture that the crib can convert into, because eventually you're going to need that bed.
The crib to bed conversion is huge for those of you that have children. You know what we're talking about. But yeah, essentially, your I won't say your website's exactly the same, but a web project never stops. It never is done, and that's scary to some people. But it's just the way that the industry works. We were talking about it before the recording here. We were talking about how there's a bunch of new technology always coming at you, and that's just the way the world works right now. Your website's no different. We do web projects, and then most of the time they go into maintenance and support, and from that we're able to grow the site and get to a lot of times we talk about like a minimum viable product, right? What's going to get this project done enough that it fits your immediate need, And then over time, we can grow on that. We can add new features. We can change designs. We can look at analytics to say, hey, this layout that we thought was so great isn't really working out for us. How can we change it to work better?
Hmm.
So your website's always growing. It's always changing. It's always evolving.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's really important to think about. If you are, let's say you're starting a business, right? Like, what do I need now, and am I going to need in 6 months, in a year? And it's great that you guys also have that approach, because I think the traditional way of doing it is like launch the site and then come back in 3 years. Like, oh, by
Yeah.
then you need a new site, and by then the world has changed significantly.
Yeah, it's true. We do a really good job of looking at the big picture and trying to suggest paths that
Hmm.
will vary in cost, vary in effort, and also vary in time frame in which they're achievable. So, I think it's situational. If you're the scrappy startup and you just need something up quick to kind of tell people who you are and provide a download link for an app or something like that, Squarespace is going to work great for you.
Right.
It's relatively inexpensive. And if you're a startup, there are probably other things you might want to do with those funds, right?
Sure.
um, if you're an e-commerce store and you're buying, you're doing a bunch of business online, right? Most of or all of your sales are done online. Then you really want to focus on your website. You want to make sure the features are there to support your customers, and and you want to put some budget behind that.
Sure.
So there are all sorts of different scale for projects out there, and what we try to do is we try to be as realistic as possible, and to try to provide as many options as possible.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. So can you tell me a little bit about Oomph, and how you guys are managing during COVID? Like, what's been going on?
Well, like everybody, or most people, I should say, we early on, our CEO had the foresight to basically close down our office and have everybody work from home. And you know, it was really an interesting transformation for the company, because we before pre-COVID, we had an office. People, a handful of people would go there every day, and then we also had employees across the country,
Mhm.
California, Arizona, Ohio. So, we were really, looking at how we could kind of bring everybody together, um, and look at a way for people that weren't in the office to feel like they were there. And you know what, through this pandemic, the playing field was leveled like instantly. Everybody was at home, and
Wish granted.
we were like, okay, so now everybody's on the same playing field. We're all working in the same, with the same tools and whatnot. And it was great. Everybody, we get on our monthly team Zoom calls, and everybody chit chats, and we get into individual groups, and overall, business has been good. We like everybody, kind of looked at our budget, looked at our forecast, and adjusted accordingly. But we've really had to support a lot of our clients, especially in education,
Right.
with new initiatives to try to fill the gap of in-person meetings and in-person events that were happening. So we've been doing really well during this the pandemic. And I think a lot of digital companies are now seeing that, hey, it's okay to let our employees work from home. And
Right.
it's something that we had been doing. We've been doing this since pretty much since the company started. We had a work from home Wednesday. So it's something that we've been moving towards slowly. But a lot of companies have just not been friends of working from home, and now it's kind of been forced upon them, and they're like, oh, this actually could work. So I think overall you're going to see a big change in the amount of people that actually show up at an office or need to show up at an office, and companies that actually have office space.
Right. Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I think a lot of the co-working spaces are seeing opportunities to, be hosting meetings and things like that, as opposed to, everybody showing up to an office the same day, and somebody, the company paying for real estate that they don't really need. And maybe they just show up once a month for their team meetings.
And full disclosure on that, we actually we actually in November bought office space and have been working through the beginning of the year to build out that office space. So we still very much have a physical office in Providence, and a headquarters there. And that space is it's great. I was actually in it the other day. And it's very much turning into a space where people can get together and meet, as opposed to a place where, hey, you have to come every day to work.
Right.
You have the option to. There are lovely desks set up that you can use for a day or a week, or however long you need to. But it's also about bringing people together. And of course, we're not there yet as far as bringing everybody together, but ultimately, the goal is to be able to bring people together again. And right now we're doing it in socially distanced, safe groups. But
Mhm, mhm.
it's something that I think is going to change the workplace, where everybody gets a cubicle and everybody has an office. And
Right.
I think we're going to get away from that and go
Yeah.
to more of a place where we can meet and have meetups and do those sorts of things.
What do you think are some of the skills that are needed for being able to successfully work remote? I'm specifically thinking about maybe a recent grad who, this is all kind of new territory.
Yeah, I think having a workspace is the first and foremost thing. And you'll notice, if you're watching the video behind me, there's a door right there. It's actually a new addition to my office, because before COVID, um, nobody was home during the day, so I didn't need a door on my office, because there were no
Right.
interruptions. Nobody was around. Um, but having a workspace, having a space where you can go every day and say, okay, I'm working. When the door's closed, I'm working, and
Yeah.
when the door's open, feel free to come in and chit chat. But also a place where you can say, okay, that's work and this is home, because everybody's
Right.
working
Yeah.
from their house now. So you could essentially work 24 hours a day. Making that division is super super important. I think as far as new grads go, and being able to jump into this kind of new remote work environment, you're looking at a couple of like pretty core skills, right? Being able to communicate via email, being able to communicate via Zoom calls,
Mhm.
um, and also understanding the technology. Understanding how to use Zoom, understanding new features of Gmail or Outlook 360, something like that.
Mhm.
I think that stuff is pretty important. And then getting more specific, depending on which avenues you're going down, which career paths you're taking, being able to understand tools that may be specific to those career paths is super important. But I think overall, the work from home, work remote mentality is one where you got to be a little bit flexible. I know personally at Oomph we have flexible hours, and you have the ability to, if you want to work from noon to 8 at night, you can work from noon to 8 at night, and if you want to work from 10 to 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, you can do that too. So looking at the job that you want and figuring out the company that you're working for, like how strict are they going to be, like you have to be at your desk from 9 to 5 every day, and
Right.
like we're gonna expect that you're there. I think that's an aspect of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really interesting how things have evolved so quickly.
Like pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
I think, if you are into the stock market, you look at Zoom's stock price. It's indicative of how quickly things have changed. Before COVID, I don't know, around, 50, 60, $100, and now they're at 500 or something like that. So like just in that small graph, you can see like, oh wow, there was some sort of big shift here.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. It's nuts. So, and then what about just in terms of digital marketing and specific skills that you think would be good for students to have to make them more marketable, our recent grads?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to tooling. I think, Google is definitely at the forefront of, SEO, marketing, ad placement. Facebook ads platform is big too. Apple even has their own ads platform. Maybe, I don't know if they're still running with that, but knowing the tools is really what it comes down to. I think that is a big aspect of it. But on the flip side of that, I think it's also um, being able to learn, right? So there's this idea of like, hey, I graduated college and like now I'm done learning, which is absolutely false. And we see it a lot more in technology where we're doing interviews and we're asking people, hey, what books are you reading? What blog posts are you checking out? What podcasts are you listening to? Like, how do you stay current? Right? That's a question that we frequently ask. And in my head, I already have the answer. I already know what I want to hear from that person.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of checking it off. Like, oh, you're listening to This Week in Tech. Interesting. You're listening to this marketing podcast or that marketing podcast or this tech podcast or that tech podcast. Oh, you've read this book. Interesting. Um, I know. I just emailed with you about People Powered. The book
Yes.
I just finished reading.
Bacon.
Yeah, and that book was great. We're actually having Jono on our podcast, Talking Drupal podcast, next week or the week after. So
Oh, cool.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's going to be
But
fantastic.
coming to an interview with something like that, like, oh, I just finished reading this book about building communities. Okay, tell me more. Like now, I'm like, hey, I read that book. Awesome.
Right.
Um,
How often does that happen?
Not very often.
Yeah.
It used to happen a lot more frequently when like some big tech pioneers were writing books. And I mean, there are a ton of marketing books and sales books out there. So, so it doesn't happen as often, but it could even be answered in a way where it's like, hey, you know what? I personally don't read books all that often. I don't really have time for them. The only reason I read People Powered was because I was on a sabbatical and I had a bunch of time to read a book. But if you were to come to an interview and say, oh, a couple months ago, I read this book, People Powered, or I read, my favorite book is, MTIV by Hillman Curtis. Like, I would say, oh, okay, well, like you are aware of that these things exist, right?
Right.
The more relevant stuff is like, blogs and podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Because
Are there
that's something.
specific ones you like or that you think that students could follow?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think This Week in Tech is a really good, like, general tech podcast to try to keep up in what's going on in the world of tech. And, there are just a ton of podcasts out there. I listen to like This Week in Tech. There's the 10/7 podcast, which is another more
Mhm.
technical podcast. But you can find lists of podcasts out there that are industry specific. I mean, there are even ones that are more leisure focused. So, I think being in an interview and saying like, hey, how do you stay current, and having somebody rattle off like two podcasts and a blog or two blogs that they listen to, and have that interviewer be like, oh, all right, so I'll listen to that, or I read that as well, is going to make a huge impression.
Yeah. I mean, speaking just based on the connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And so, what might be a good trick is if you know that you're going to be interviewing in a company and you know who may be interviewing you,
Mhm.
you could go on their LinkedIn profile and see what they're posting about, because a lot of people will be posting snippets from the books that they're reading or from the podcasts they're listening to. Not everybody does that, but it's something that I am trying to get into more of a habit of doing.
Mhm.
Also, another interesting tool out there it's an app called Blinkist,
Mhm.
and it's sort of like Cliff Notes, and you can pick like which genres. And I got in early enough that I get one free every day, but it kind of compresses a whole book into a 12-minute highlights reel. And listen to that on double speed, and you got your, and some of them, there's just too many books to read in essence.
Mhm.
But there are a lot that there'll be like one key point and you're like, oh wow, so I'll like copy and paste and put it into my calendar, and as a reminder, so like once a month I'll get that snippet from that book and I'll read it, and it'll just pop up. But I spoke to Gail Lofson's URI class last night or yesterday, and was recruiting some of her students to listen into this Facebook Live series, or to, we spit it out as a podcast too, and then just take a highlight, right, and post that on your LinkedIn, tag us, and that is an easy way. So let's say I'm going to be interviewing John Picozzi. Well, I could listen to his podcast and pull out a quote from his podcast and be like, oh, okay, and then tag John, and then he's like, oh, here's somebody who's, it's like it's building bridges, and I think that's one thing that maybe is not taught enough.
Yeah, connections are super, super duper important. So, my whole career has been, based on connections from one job to another. So much so that my current boss, uh, her husband was a boss at a previous company.
Mhm.
So, I mean, connections are super important. And the LinkedIn thing is a great idea. In sales, we're always using LinkedIn to figure out who we're talking to, what their position is,
Mhm.
what they might be interested in. The only trick there is that LinkedIn tells people that you're looking at their profile. So just be
Right.
aware that if you don't want that person to know you're kind of checking them out, um, don't go logged into LinkedIn and looking at their profile. But you can also do Google search on the person's name and their company very easily and find all sorts of information about them. I would say that is also like, and I know like every single person that has recommendations for job interviews says, oh, do your research on the company. But do your research on the company. It's astounding to me the number of people that come into interviews and we turn it over to them like, hey, do you have any questions for us? And they're like, yeah, well, can you just tell me what it's like to work there? Yeah, I can, but it's going to take me some time, and I will answer the question, but it's not really a well formed question, especially if you've kind of stuttered and
Right.
really
No,
like
not really prepared.
felt like you were kind of pulling it out of your back pocket. Come prepared with questions, be able to say, oh, like what kind of clients do you service? What types of marketing are you doing now? What types of technologies are you working with? um, it makes it more, it makes more of that connection that we were just talking about, and it makes you more memorable. Like, oh,
Right.
remember that person, they listened to these 3 podcasts that we listened to, and oh,
Right.
they also asked this really great question. um
That's a really good point, right? Is to just remember that you are one of a series, you, the student or a recent grad, are one of a series of people, right? So it's not just demonstrating what you know, but leaving a memorable
mhm.
point. Yeah.
Yep. And I think there are a bazillion tips that I could give recent grads about interviewing. You talk about you know if you get to that second interview or you get to an offer letter, right? Then you have to deal with like salary expectations. Anywhere I've ever worked, I've had like a very made up. There's no science behind it, so don't like quote me on this, but basically a scale in my head of like how much stuff I got to put up with, and like what the pay is, and how that scale factors. If the pay is low and you have to put up with a bunch of crap, then maybe that's
Like a
not the
long
right job. That
things. Yeah.
Yeah, or job functions that are outside of your job responsibilities, added pressures at work, that sort of thing. um that sort of thing factors in. I was once looking at a job in Boston, and that's would have added I don't know, 3 hours of commute time to my day.
Right.
An hour and a half on either end. And I have a family, so um I was looking, locally, and I actually had reached out to Chris Murray, the CEO of Oomph, and said, "Hey, Chris, I'm looking at this other job. I know we had talked. Are you interested in, are you interested in moving forward?" And he was like, "I am. Like, can you give me like a day?" And we ended up talking, and we ended up talking about, salary. And I'm like, "Okay, so here's where I'm at." And I was completely honest. I was like, "Here's where I'm at. You guys are X number of dollars away from each other, but I'm also going to have to pay X number of dollars to commute every
Right.
day, every day or 3 times a week or whatever it comes down to. So if
Sure.
you can come up this much, like we can be done with this." And
Yes.
he was like, Absolutely, sure, that sounds great." And it's been awesome. I've been with them for going on 6 years now. And
Wow, that's awesome.
you know,
That's a very long time in agency world.
it is, and it's really because the scale is
Yeah.
in the opposite. I feel that I'm definitely a valued part of the team. And the kind of day-to-day job is really exciting, and I get to talk to and meet all sorts of people, so
Mhm.
super rewarding. And that's super important when you're
Right.
coming out of college, you're looking for a job. I remember my first job, the startup that I worked for. um, I came out of college, and I definitely got lowballed. Like,
Yeah.
I was basically working for well, it wasn't free, but it was pretty close. And after a while, I started noticing things about the startup where I was like, let me ask for a little bit more money. And you know, we were working long hours. We were working all sorts of crazy. It was a startup. We were
Yeah.
working startup hours.
Yes.
And and it was basically like, nah, can't do anything, can't move, can't
Right.
if you feel like you got to go somewhere else, go ahead. And it was just like, at that point, it was like, okay, my value isn't there. Like,
Right.
clearly, if they're willing to say like,
Right.
and
Right.
not even attempt to make the
Right.
person happy.
Where is that startup now?
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
Maybe not even existing.
Um, probably not. I,
Yeah.
I
With that
honestly,
mentality.
I honestly don't know. It's another great point is, looking backwards isn't really going to get you to go forward. So,
Mm-hmm.
I've always tried to be as professional as humanly possible. And I've left a few jobs, and we've parted ways in various methods. But I've never really looked back to see like, hey, where are those people now? And like, oh, those people. It's always just like, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's on the horizon? And I think
Of course.
that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. And then before when we spoke, you guys had a hiring freeze. Is that still in place?
No, it isn't. So we did have a hiring freeze during the
That was like, yeah,
pandemic
May.
times, when it was hot and heavy there. But right now we are actually in the process of hiring front end and back end development talent. So if you're listening and you happen to be a front end or back end developer, you can feel free to go to umfinc.com and put in a job application. We would be more than happy to talk to you, and hopefully we can work together.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. And then what about for the like social media, SEO, search, ads, that realm?
So
Yes, in
in
there.
in that area right now, we are not hiring, unfortunately. Sorry.
It's okay.
But we're always we're growing. Our plan is to bring on more employees as this year closes out, next year gets ramped up.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would check out our website. That's the best way to know what we have open right now, what we're hiring for. And it changes. I would say probably changes every couple of months, so check back often.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah. And then what do you really expect, let's say for like digital, social, email marketing? I know that you typically are working more with the technical development side, but
Mhm.
what are some of the skills that you guys are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's approachable. Our core, being able to associate a person back to our core values is super important. So personal, driven, and smart. Um, Being able to come out of an interview and say, "Wow, that person was really, really personal. They seem to be driven, and they asked really great questions," is super super important. Also being able to being a subject matter expert in the area in which we're hiring. If we're hiring a marketing person, like, we expect them to know something about marketing a digital consultancy, and a digital agency is similar to ours. And I would say, on the personal thing, that goes really far. I remember back to interviews that have gone really well, and they've always I've always come out of them and gotten an email, or I remember even somebody wrote handwritten, like, cards. Like, I got this card in the mail and I was like, "What is this?" And I opened it up and I was like, "Oh wow!" I'm like, "This is really super super cool." Like, somebody actually took the time to write a card and um, sent it to me. So that
Awesome.
that sort of stuff is super super important, I think.
Excellent. Well, we're just about at the half hour mark, and I know that you're a pretty busy person, professional in working at OOMF and a lot of other areas in your podcast. What's the name of your podcast again?
It's the Talking Drupal podcast. You can find that where you find all your favorite podcasts.
Nice. Awesome. Well, John, I really appreciate your time and all your insights to share with students, and looking forward to working with you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody listening is wants to ask more questions, you can catch me on Twitter at John Picozzi.
Nice. Awesome. Okay.